Hi there and welcome back. If you're new to this channel, my name is Nathan Hassall and I am the current Poet Laureate of Malibu, California. Today we have a very special live recording with the Poet Laureate of South Pasadena, author of over 12 poetry books, and prize-winning poet Ron Koertge. I am very excited to be sharing this with you. If you haven't already, please do click subscribe and let's jump into the video.
The circle has been closed, or the rectangle, all the doors are shut, which I always love because it feels like now we're more in a closer, intimate space. So welcome everyone, people who already know me. You probably don't need to listen to this next bit, but for those who don't, I am Nathan Hassall and currently the Poet Laureate of Malibu. Thank you. I will be your host today, and I thought it was quite fitting that because we've had a break for the summer and now this is the first Caffeinated Verse event since May, it's cloudy again. I feel like I said this last year at the same time, so it seems that coinciding with the poetry season are clouds in Malibu, so I thought that was quite cool to see. As we were just driving down PCH, there was like a lot of mist over the sea and there was one paddleboarder that was in the middle, and that was just kind of a great moment to drop me back into hosting these events. So welcome. Let me say how these events go. We start with our featured reader, and after that we have a Q&A session, followed by a break, followed by the open mic. If you'd like to read at the open mic and you haven't signed up already, during the break you will have a chance to sign up here. Is that clear for everyone? Yeah. Are we all ready for some poetry? Yeah. Oh wow. The enthusiasm was like the clouds. Are we ready for some poetry?
Yeah.
Don't you feel better? Okay. Today we are having Ron Koertge as our feature. He is currently the Poet Laureate of South Pasadena and the author of over a dozen books of poetry from university and independent presses. Billy Collins calls Ron a poet with a charming combination of wit and empathy, satire and sweetness. Words that I already find hard to disagree with. The prose poem of Ron's, called Negative Space, was the basis for an Oscar-nominated short in 2018. He has grants from the NEA and the California Arts Council, and recently won a Pushcart Prize. So here to read from some of his poetry books is Ron Koertge. Welcome, Ron.
I am, by the way, still waiting for that pushcart. So every time the UPS guy pulls up, I think, whoa, what's a pushcart? Never is. Is the sound good?
Yeah.
Not too close, not too far away. Lovely. One of the things I like about coming to a new place to read, and particularly seeing you all come in like this, is that you know one another, and you know Rachel, you know Nathan, but you don't know me. So I often start readings by doing this, and I say, "Hello, everybody," and you say, "Hi, Ron." So you ready? Hello, everybody.
Hi, Ron.
Ready to go. Okay. I'm going to read 20 minutes at the most, more like 15. My wife urges me not to talk too much between poems because I really am a chatterbox. I love to talk about where the poems came from, where I was when I thought about the poems. I'll try to keep that maybe to a minimum.
No.
Don't do that. Huh? This first poem, called First Grade, is only 8 lines. You can see how small it is. It's been in so many anthologies. I write fiction for middle grade readers, And here's the joke. Not that there isn't plenty of money in poetry. But there is some money in middle grade fiction, and I take advantage of it. So this poem, first grade, turns up in anthologies of all kinds. And the kids write me letters, and I'll read you a poem about those letters in just a bit. But first of all, this poem, I have a light touch with poetry, but this little 8-line poem is really about conformity, docility, and submission. You wouldn't know it from its light tone, but here it is, first grade. Before that, we thought every forest had wolves in it. We thought it would be fun to wear snowshoes all the time. And we thought we could walk on water. So who is this woman with gray breath, calling our names and pointing to the little desks we will occupy for the rest of our lives? Now you know. Now you remember. I think I'm going to read 2 holiday poems. The first is kind of a Halloween poem, and then the other a Christmassy poem. The Halloween poem is, my wife and I used to live in one of the houses where the slasher movie Halloween was made. So on Halloween night, we would sit on the porch with friends and drinks and watch the kids come up, the neighborhood kids. It got boring. My mind wanders. I have a little notebook. The secret to writing poetry, it seems to me, is to always be available for the poem. I believe in poets being the doorway between the infinite and the finite. I'm just there, the kind of secretary or amanuensis, to write these things down when they're ready to come through. So it was clear to me when I saw what happened on the October 31st a few years ago, there was a poem in this, October 31st. When it's clear that Frankenstein has a fever, I bring him inside, put his bag of candy on the table. His friend Liz comes in to see if Marco is okay. She's Frankenstein's wife, complete with a tall black wig and her arms wrapped in bandages. She puts her hand to his forehead and says, he needs electricity. I call his mother instead. And moments later, Julia rushes in, sits beside Marco for a minute, pats him and holds his hand. And then she carries him down the steps and into the teeming streets. Julia is barefoot and pale. Marco draped across her arms. Ghosts and princesses make way, candy strewn in their path. The cloud passes in front of the moon, and every dog in the neighborhood starts to howl. All of you, and including me, of course, and all of you, you're old enough, I hope, to have been in love a lot and have your hearts broken. It's just the best. Looking back on heartbreak in a kind of noirish way is just delightful. And this poem called, do you all remember the song called The Man I Love? Someday He'll Come Along. It's a great old song. The lyrics are woven into the poem. The poem is called, simply enough, Someday. From the Audi beside me at the red light comes Ella Fitzgerald's The Man I Love, one of the great torch songs. The lyrics are quaint. He'll be big and strong. He'll build a little home just meant for two. And someday he'll come along. The song was part of an early musical called Lady Be Good, but it was cut. Added to a new show, it was cut again. And in a way, the brush off was perfect for the theme of unrequited love. Tears and yearning and regret. Him or her with somebody else. And who hasn't imagined burning that bed with its tangled sheets? Who hasn't sat staring into a glass of bourbon, a smoldering torch the only light in the room. This poem called Self-Reliance has a little anti-urbanity in it because it's from the Midwest where I was born. My parents were poor. We all worked. I had a Social Security card when I was 14. Worked my way through college, to grad school, etc. I could drive a tractor. It's not much called for in LA, but you never know. The zombie apocalypse. I like to weave these kind of country things into poems. In this poem, it's my point of view, but in it my wife talks over and talks and takes over, as you'll see. Everything has a self-explanatory, self-reliance. My wife puts down the book she's studying for her night class and says to me, "Can you believe that Ralph Waldo Emerson didn't make love to his wife so we could pour every ounce of passion into his work?" And so I tell her, every high school football coach tells his boys that, forget the pretty cheerleaders, save it for the game. She looks out a window, stirs her decaf. When I was 16, she said, a boyfriend I had named Brooks drove us out to the North Pasture almost every day. The last time, I got out of the bed of his pickup, folded his mama's quilt, and walked by myself through a village. Brooks and his dad raised cattle for beef, and when these dairy heifers saw me, they wandered out. I scratched their foreheads, they leaned in, they were big and warm, and didn't know that a stockyard truck was coming. I was right next to this steel stock tank. I could see the moon on the water, me in my underwear, cows all around me. The Midwest. A little bit of water.
Yeah.
Here's the poem that I alluded to earlier. The poem where people wrote to me. We've been writing fiction for middle grades. This goes back 30 years where people wrote by hand. There were no, writing bots. There was no email. If you wrote, you just wrote. So sometimes the teachers would say, pick a poet from the anthology and write to them. And I would get these handwritten letters, which just charmed my pants off. I loved getting them. And I wrote back to everyone. I would write postcards. So over the years, one of the things that I loved about the postcard, the letters, were how frank they were. Because middle grade kids will say anything. They don't know if they're being rude, they're just being inquisitive. They don't care, they're 12 or something. So maybe out of 100 letters, I kind of mushed them all together and made a composite letter. All the little things people have said to me. Called Dear Mr. K. Koertge is a hard name. And my students, when I taught, was always Mr. K. So here's the letter, the composite. Dear Mr. K, the reason I'm writing today is I keep seeing deeper meanings in your poems, but my friends say there's nothing there. And at one point when you go to the racetrack, I think the rain stands for something, but everybody says it's just rain. You can settle things if you are kind and you want to write back. I saw your picture somewhere online, and you look kind for an old person. Do you do anything special to look not as old as you might look if you didn't do anything? Like a vitamin, maybe? Do you know that your poems sprawl on the page like lazy cats? Do you like that simile? I learned that from you. Okay, I agree with my father. Nobody makes similes for a living. Or maybe I'm wrong. How much do you make per year? Or even per month? or even persimmon. But that's too nosy, pretend I didn't ask. I like you as a poet. You're very simple to read compared to famous poets. Write back soon, okay? My grandfather looked pretty good like you do, but he died in church sitting up. Well, that's all for now. It's raining outside. If I were a poet, it would probably stand for something, but I'm not, so it's just rain. Thank you. Always a crowd pleaser. And it's so true. So here's a poem about something we've all done, which is help a child, son or daughter, niece or nephew, doesn't matter, bury a pet, right? If you're a parent, certainly. I'm not a parent, and I've done it. It's an interesting, and it's, for me, a sobering event. So in this poem, I pretend I have a daughter. I don't have children, but I've written about a daughter named Molly all my writing life. So I have an imaginary daughter I've been writing about, who I'm very glad to see her when she comes into the poems. Molly's not in this poem. She's too old now. His daughter is quite young. So ceremony, when we're talking about it, just the poem. Today my daughter comes home with a hamster she found wrapped in a math test by a tired school teacher and destined for a janitor's indifferent cart. So we take Harry the hamster to a spot behind the green shed where he'll join a canary called Patsy Montana, as well as Cosmo the chameleon. I have to go for a shovel this time, like a real grave digger. Harry waits in his shoebox coffin, lined with a tank top that her mother won't let her wear until she's older. She puts on the angel wings again. She recounts how Harry didn't like leftovers, how he loved the almond inside the nibbler toy. She sings. She rhymes hamster and dumpster, Harry and cemetery, and she assures him that the bedding in paradise is from God's favorite pine tree. I lean on the shovel and remember a Buddhist teaching about death, how earth turns into water, water into fire, fire into air, air into luminance, then into radiance. I know, it's a lot for a little hamster. So I wish him well. I hope for an interesting rebirth. I'm sure he has accumulated merit in this life, patient with the sweaty hands of third graders, never biting with his serious teeth, but only gnawing on apple sticks before he steps into a golden wheel and runs and runs and runs. I would think two. There's always something. A lot of poets have the two poem warning, and I do it, but I think it's dangerous because you don't want to give the 2 poem warning and have someone in the back say, "Thank God for that." I've heard it happen because I've been around. You know the poetry poem called the Obad, the morning poem? Well, now you do. It's Aubade, and it's a classic poem, and it's written as a morning poem. And then my little poem kind of explains what it is. It's usually lovers parting reluctantly. If they've been in bed, we've been making love all night or part of the night, and you wake up and it's wrenching when you part. This poem is set at Home Depot. So it's not quite the same thing. My wife and I were at a Home Depot 2 Christmases ago. We're there very early because I like to be everywhere early. And Home Depot, in its wisdom, had seen early in the Christmas season to dress some of their employees as fairy tale characters, which I thought, I looked at Bianca and I literally said, I can work with this. So I remember writing drafts of this poem and having it not present itself to me, not give itself over to me. It just wasn't going to cooperate. And then eventually it did, as you'll see. And I have to say, I know I'm chattering now, and I can't help it. But I have to say, I find Snow White so callous. Here are these 7 little men who love her, and she settles for some guy who always struck me as a model for Kohl's sport coats. Just an average prince. It's very difficult for me to come to terms with her. So a lot of conversation. Here's the poem. The Obeyed. Not quite 6 a.m., the hour of rumpled lovers, cursing what John Donne calls the unruly sun. And then the doors to Home Depot open and we pour in, surprising Snow White sharing a cigarette with some guys from the loading dock. I make my way to garden and patio, and there's Snow White again in an orange Home Depot apron, already hard at work, rearranging asters and lavender, hoisting 40-pound bags of bird seed, dragging one garden gnome by its red cap, and then 2 more, and then 4 more, until she's surrounded by 7 little plaster men. Everything bathed in almond-colored light from the east window. No prince to take her away this time. No baffled dwarves looking at each other in dismay. And finally, a new poem, the one that my wife hasn't heard. But I always try to read at least one poem she hasn't heard. She's been to, I don't know how many poetry readings, and MRIs show that there's no real damage. So in case you go to a lot, you're safe. This is the new poem called An American Chronicle. No explanation, no chatter, just the poem itself. An American Chronicle. I'm sitting with Ben drinking lemonade and gin. We're talking about his great-grandfather who built this porch from fieldstones, hauled up, fieldstones hauled up the river by enormous Clydesdale horses named Beauty and Gray Prince, and how in those days men coddled their animals, gave them amorous names, dressed them in velvet, and then yelled at their wives and made them cry. Fire in the mountains are driving bears into the suburbs, where they knock over the frozen margarita machines and poop in the hot tub. Golden-haired newsmen roll up their sleeves, lights in the studios flicker and hiss. Birds drop leaflets about how crummy spring is, and it's all our fault. My mother joined a cult of disappointing mothers, and Ben's fiance left him for someone with an electric bike. Last night, my friend Sasha dialed a suicide hotline that was put on hold. So we're going to call Sasha and ask her to come over and bring chips. Because lately, it seems like everyone we know is dialing the suicide hotline. And the only reason we're all here now is because it's busy. That's my part of the morning. It's a pleasure to read to you. We get it?
Yeah, we'll chat
All
down
right,
there.
we'll chat.
All right. Right, let's have one more round of applause for Ron Koertge to electrify our Saturday morning. Okay, so I'm going to ask Ron 3 or 4 questions, and then we're going to open it up to everyone here. So if you would like to ask a question after that,
And do not be shy.
do not be shy. And just raise your hand and we can continue with that. So, Ron, I think my first question is, you have a great sense of humor that comes across in your personality, the patter, as they say in Scotland, between your poems, and it distills into your poetry. Do you have any advice for poets to engage with humor more in their work?
Well, you can't teach people to be funny, right?
Right.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've taught all my life. I started to teach when I was 25, and now I'm 84. So that's a haul. I taught until I was, 65?
No.
62?
67.
Oh, even I taught till I was in my 60s. And then I taught for a while with some friends of mine who were teaching an MFA program for people who wanted to be children's writers. And that would be picture books, middle grade, and YA. So it was low residency. So I taught that for a while. But I always worked poetry, into the curriculum. It's the longest way of saying this. When I was teaching in the MFA program, I would have students, many of them were middle-aged women who always wanted to write for kids. They'd been moms, they'd told their kids stories, and they had stories in their heads. So they signed up. And they said to me, I didn't know I could be funny in my writing. And I've had poetry students tell me that, even though they're humorous poets. So it seemed to me that my job, as far as people saying to me, can I be funny like you, or should I be funny? The answer is absolutely. I seem to be able to open a door and give permission to people who thought it was not the thing to do, that all poetry is serious. Well, I mean, you've heard me read. My poetry has serious undertones, but it's rarely serious on the surface. That it has this little cold water stream, underneath the hot stuff, above. So that was half an answer.
Great. I think that's a good segue into what I had second, because you said about the poet being between the doorway of the infinite and the finite, and what I saw of the finite felt extremely down to earth. So my question is, how do you find the best way to mix the larger topics and the more, like grief and death, but also pin it in locations like Home Depot, for example?
Well, I used to teach something called the abstraction ladder. And in the abstraction ladder, at the top, I'll use myself. At the top of the abstraction ladder is mankind. And then you work your way down to all men, like Nathan and all. And then you work your way down to men in their 80s. And then you work your way down to men in their 80s who live in South Pasadena. And you work your way down to me. That's the bottom rung of the abstraction ladder. If you're going to write, you need to work at the first rung of the abstraction ladder. Feet on the ground, absolutely there. So you're working in Home Depot, or you're working in Gorman's bookstore, or you're working at the racetrack, or you're working at the supermarket. If you start there, then you have a foundation, and you can climb the ladder. The idea of grief comes in. If I wanted to tell someone that I was sad, I wouldn't write a poem saying, I'm sad. I'd go to them and I'd take their hand and I'd say, I am so sad today. But if I wanted to write about it, I would find a way that would make it more memorable to other people than my hand in theirs. My hand in there, they remember me, but in the poem, a lot of people remember me. I get letters about poems, and people say, I carry this poem around with me in your purse, in your wallet, or in your car. But it isn't because I've told them something. I've written something beautiful that they can't help but identify with and want to hold close to their hearts. I started at the bottom one.
Amazing, thank you. I guess this segues quite well as well. You said that you have a fictional daughter in the poem that you're writing. I know often that when people read, my poems or others, that they presume it's autobiographical. What would you say that? I think I've got this. How would you say that the poet can resist seeming autobiographical in ways of bringing in more fictional components from their imagination?
Well, my poetry student, I still have some poetry students, when they write poems and they show them to me, and I say to them, Robin, this young woman I'm thinking of, I say to her, I've seen you write stronger poems than this. And she says, well, Ron, this really happened. And I, thank you. That's it. That doesn't mean it's going to be a good poem. Wordsworth said, poetry is part imagination and part autobiography. So I said to Robin, I know the autobiography part. Where's the imagination? Because what I wanted Robin to do was infuse the autobiography with something imaginative and make it memorable. So for her, we're talking about Robin now, I had her move away from free verse and write in blank verse, like the same poem. Remember blank verse, remember? In iambic pentameter with no rhyme. And that shrunk that poem of hers, drew it in because she could only have 5 beats per line, 5 feet per line, made the poem much better. Well, iambic pentameter is a kind of music. And iambic pentameter is everywhere. Where was I?
It's a heartbeat.
It is your heartbeat. I heard a guy say once, I'm remembering this, I need to go downtown and buy myself a hat. That is perfect iambic pentameter. I need to go downtown and buy myself a hat. He's just talking to his buddy. So it's everywhere, this heartbeat meter. But Robin hadn't tuned into it, hadn't listened to it. She was so anxious to tell the autobiographical story the way it happened.
Okay. My final question is based on something else you said. You said always be available for the poem. What do you mean by that?
Well, I'm lucky. I wish I were younger, but I'm not. So I'm just going to be lucky and be older. But I have a lot of time. I have enough money to be comfortable and not to worry too much about finances. And all I do now is write. That's what I do. I get up every day of the week, every day of the month. I write 365 days of the year. But 300 of those days, I'm writing crap. It's awful. Because Bianca will say to me, when I see her afternoon usually, how'd your work go? And I'll say, oh my God, it was terrible. And then we go on. We go to the movies, I go to the races, we watch something on TV, whatever we do. But I'm blue collar from the jump. I've worked all my life. If I don't get up and go to work, I'm difficult to be with, ask my wife. I'm grumpy about the whole thing. And it doesn't matter to me if I'm writing well or ill. I'm grateful when it goes well. I'm not discouraged when it goes badly, because it will go well eventually. I put in the time. But I have the time. Yes.
Question. So do you have a set schedule, like every morning at this time you sit down for this amount of time, or do you kind of just flow with it?
You know, I go upstairs, oh, I don't know, around 8, I guess. I do other stuff, you know. I like to go to the races, so I look and see who's running. If we're going to the movies, I check and see what time it's going to start. And I also read a lot of poetry. I read somebody else's every day. You know, the Poetry Foundation, right? Online. There's always a daily poem. I mouse around there. And I'm felonious about poems. I'm a great thief. I don't believe in, I mean, what's the line from Up There? You know, real poets steal, amateurs borrow. So I don't plagiarize, but I find lines from other poets that I find really exciting. And then I wonder if I could do that. I wonder how I could do that. I'll go through poems and I'll circle the word I find the most invigorating, and I'll put it into a poem. I'm going to teach a Zoom workshop in a little bit, and I'm going to make those students write blank verse with 2 internal rhymes, and they have to use the word Frankenstein. It'll make them write something that they would not have thought of otherwise. So I find myself an outlier word and make myself use it in the poem. And I see what I can come up with. I fail all the time. So what? Nobody's watching. Yeah.
I want an example of what you call your crap poems.
Well, I don't have them. Well, I don't have them with me. I throw them away.
Throw them away.
Oh, God, yeah.
And when's your trash pickup?
I just, I like to throw things away. You know, I like to discard them. Because I think it's like, I make room for more. I like to make room for more.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
This is just a comment. I've been watching Mrs. K and you reading her poems, and she still is laughing at all of your humor.
Well, my wife's is just the sweetest thing in the world. Yeah. And such a good heart. But the poems are still funny, aren't they? What are you going to say? Somebody else?
Any other questions?
Yeah.
A comment, because we spoke briefly before you.
Yeah, is that with you? Yeah.
Yes, and you asked me what brought me here today, and so I said it's my first time, and my answer was, well, I came from you, and it sounded nice, but I wasn't familiar with you or your work. And now having heard it, taking it in, that is so true. This is, you right now I consider one of the richest discoveries I've had in my life.
Oh, how nice.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Maybe one more?
On the right? As loud as you can, like.
When we were talking about the library and how there's the bigger concept, and we kind of tie it to like something really material. Do you find that you start off with like the material and then go to like the dating, or you start with the big concept when you try to like something material?
I start with the first rung, you know, the specific, and then I hope and pray the larger issues will come in. And on a good day they do. On a bad day, they're somewhere else.
So you're hoping the material becomes the doorway to
Yes.
that more abstract.
I just think putting your butt in the chair, you know, is an invitation to writing well. Yeah.
You say you do middle school book
Fiction, yeah.
fiction. So is there interplay between the topics or the ideas in the fiction and the poetry, or are they totally separate processes?
They're pretty much a separate process. And this sounds self-congratulatory, but I'm going to say it anyway. One of the reasons that I can write middle grade fiction is that writing poetry has made me a better prose writer. Writing poetry will make anybody a better prose writer. Also, when I was teaching in that MFA program for kids writers, I would have my students, I would give them assignments, and when they sent me their prose, it was 40 pages a month, which is a lot of prose. I would have them write me 2 poems. I gave them assignments. Otherwise, they would never do it. I'd give them hard topics. I had them write them sestinas, which are just so difficult. They're easy to write once you get the 6 words, but they're usually so mechanical and banal. But still, they would never do it if I had an assignment. If you write prose, you should read poetry. And if you read poetry, you should read it out loud and walk around your room. Do you know that?
Oh,
Yeah. I used to go to a homeopath. I like to go to outre healers. And I used to go to a homeopath, and his wife taught ESL. All of her students had to move as she was teaching them. Movement seems to make the language easier and help the language stick. So when I'm up in my room, up in my studio, I walk around when I read poetry from the Poetry Foundation. I love to move and read poetry. The rhythm will start, and sometimes I think, okay, the engine is going. The furnace is heating up. And then I'll sit down and really go to work.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Ron, just before we get right to the end, can you say what books you have up there?
I do.
Introduce them. I can grab
I
them too.
do. Do you know what I should do? Do you mind, Nathan? I'm going to read them one more film.
Sure.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
I'm going to read you from this book of flash fiction or prose poems. It's called Sex World, but you can tell from the little cover that's merely naughty, which is a great word. No one uses naughty anymore. But
In England, we do.
do they?
yeah.
It's
But we'd say naughty.
It's just great. So I have these 2 books. This is flash fiction. Oh, no. This is flash fiction. I'm going to read you a poem. And this, with the wonderful cover, is poetry. Some of the poems I read today are in it. You can tell with the title, I Dreamed I Was Emily Dickinson's Boyfriend. You are dealing with a serious person. Today, these books are for sale today for $10. One of the reasons is I love what Nathan does so much that I want to be like him. I mean, Nathan's enthusiasm and passion for poetry is just infectious. So he's generous with his time, so I'm going to be generous with my books. If you want a book, they're $10 today. So this poem called Negative Space was the basis, do you hear me? Yeah. Was the basis for, help me, Bianca,
The 2018 Oscar-nominated short.
in animated.
Shorts.
Yeah.
Animated shorts.
Yes, right. So someone took this little piece, prose poem, made it into an animated short film. They went through one film thing after another. You have to win your way toward the Academy Awards. So they went through, I forget what Rue told me, 15 or 20, working their way up until it was up for an Academy Award. It was the year that Kobe Bryant won for Dear Basketball. We all knew he was going to win. It's Kobe Bryant. And every old white guy in the Academy just checked his box, and I don't blame him. But God, they did a good job. And when I'm done with the poem, I'll tell you how you can see it. You can see it on YouTube. Here's the point. I won't talk about it. It's about luggage and how to pack. Negative space. My dad taught me to pack. Lay out everything, put back half. Roll things that roll, wrinkle-prone things go on top of cotton things, in pants, waist to hem, nooks and crannies for socks, belts around the sides like snakes, plastic over all of that, and the shoes, wear heavy stuff on the plane. We started when I was little. He'd pretend to put me in the suitcase and we'd laugh. Some guys bond with their dads shooting hoops or talking about Chevrolets. We did it over luggage. By the time I was 12 and he was busy, I would pack for him. My mom tried but didn't have the knack. He would get somewhere, open his suitcase, and text me, perfect. That one word from him meant a lot. His funeral was terrible. Him laid out in that big carton and me crying and thinking, look at all that wasted space. Those are the books.
All right, and you can purchase those books. As Ron said, they are $10 each. You can pay by Venmo or cash. He has assured me that he has change on him, so you can break the note. Kerry?
Where can you watch the video?
Oh,
It's,
YouTube.
it's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube.
Just negative space.
You just Google negative space.
Yeah.
It's worth a look. They did what a job.
By Tiny Inventions.
And we'll link that when we post this on YouTube. We will link the negative space video to that as well. So we're going to have a 5 or 10 minute break. If you haven't signed up yet for the open mic and you'd like to read, the sign up sheet is at the front, as is a sheet next to it to put your email down if you want to hear about all the poetry events in Malibu. And there are free bookmarks that you can use when you buy Ron's books or any other point. So Ron, thank you very much. Can we get a round of applause before we have a break? And tea and coffee at the back.
Bianca, everybody, everyone.
Well, like that, my Bianca. Yes.